I got great news. Today you're going to learn about how organisms are classified. So your notes are over the classification of living things. Your objective is to learn that organisms are classified into domains and kingdoms based on their characteristics. As living things are constantly being investigated, new attributes or characteristics are revealed that affect how organisms are placed in a standard classification system. So, what is taxonomy? Taxonomy is the branch of biology concerned with the grouping and the naming of organisms. Biologists who study this are called taxonomists. Well, you're probably wondering how this all started. Well, people wanted to organize their world, so they began grouping or classifying everything they saw. So, let's look at these examples of how we may organize living things. Please make sure you write down at least 2 of these examples. We may organize living things by the way they break down dead material, if they reproduce sexually or asexually, if they're single-celled or multicellular, whether they have a nucleus or a cell wall, or if they eat other organisms. So why classify? Well, we classify to help us see relationships, meaning we classify things to help us see the similarities and differences between the organisms. This also helps us organize all organisms we discover. And this is important because to give every species a name based on a standard method, this allows scientists to communicate with each other from different countries. So this provides a common language. This standard method of classification provides a common language that scientists can use to communicate with each other from different parts of the world. So who is Carolus Linnaeus? Who is this good-looking guy? Well, Carolus Linnaeus, he developed a 7-level classification system based on similarities between organisms. The 7-level system are domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. This is how I remember the 7 levels. Dear King Philip called Oprah for good spices. I'm going to ask you to come up with your own way to remember the 7-level system, so keep this in mind. Domains. We have 3 broad domains, and these domains are the broadest level, and they are bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. Please write down these 3 domains in your notes. The domains archaea, bacteria, and eukarya are then divided into kingdoms. Archaea, the domain archaea has the kingdom Archaeobacteria. The domain bacteria, kingdom Eubacteria. Eukarya has 4 kingdoms, Protista or Protists, fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. Well, how does it work? There are 6 broad kingdoms. Every living thing that we know of fits into one of the 6 kingdoms I just mentioned. Each level gets more specific as fewer organisms fit into any one group. The grouping of organisms into kingdoms is based on 3 factors, based on the cell type, the cell number, and the feeding type. And I'm going to look at those in more detail in a few seconds. For cell type, we're looking for the presence or absence of a nucleus. So basically, we want to know if the cell is prokaryotic or eukaryotic. Prokaryotic cells do not have a nucleus. They are in the kingdom Eubacteria. They're typically unicellular, and they do have a cell wall. An example of a prokaryotic cell would be a bacteria. Eukaryotic cells do have a nucleus. Please make sure you put that in your notes. Remember, pro means no and U means true nucleus. The second criteria for the kingdom divisions is cell number. If an organism is unicellular, it means single-celled or one-celled. Examples of that would be protozoans, bacteria, and some algae. Multicellular organisms have many cells, and those cells are specialized and are differentiated. Here is an example of unicellular organisms and multicellular organisms. What type of cell do you think you have? Or are you unicellular or multicellular? I hope you said multicellular. If you thought multicellular to yourself, give yourself a pat on the back. Thank you. The third criteria for kingdom division is the feeding type. How do the organisms get their food? Well, if the organism is an autotroph or a producer, they make their own food. Examples would be plants, trees, grass, things of that nature. Heterotrophs or consumers, they must eat other organisms to survive. So please make sure you add must eat other organisms to survive. Heterotrophs do include decomposers as well. Decomposers eat dead matter. Examples of heterotrophs would be lions, tigers, dogs, cats, human beings, things of that nature. Now it's time to think. Flip your sheet over and let's look at the characteristics of kingdoms comparison matrix. We're going to fill this out right now. So as you can see, we have the domains and the kingdoms filled out already. So remember, our kingdoms are Archaeobacteria, Eubacteria, Protista or Protists, fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. Archaeobacteria and Eubacteria are prokaryotes, and Protists, fungi, Plantae, and Animalia are eukaryotic cells. Pro means no nucleus, eukaryotic, true nucleus. Please make sure you fill this out on your chart right now under cell type. We're on the first row for the domain Archaea, the kingdom Archaeobacteria. We already filled in for the cell type prokaryotic. Now let's fill in our data table, our matrix for cell number. The Archaeobacteria is unicellular. The feeding type would be autotrophic or autotroph. This cell reproduces asexually. That will be the last column. And the Archaeobacteria has a cell wall. All right, now we're looking at domain bacteria. We're on technically the third row. We're looking at kingdom Eubacteria. We just labeled prokaryotic. These organisms are made of one cell or unicellular. They make their own food by using photosynthesis, but these Eubacteria can also be heterotrophic. So make sure for feeding type you put autotroph and heterotroph. They can be either one. Bacteria has a cell wall and they produce asexually, meaning by themselves. Domain Eukarya. This is the next, we're looking at domain Eukarya. We're looking at kingdom Protista. They do have a nucleus, so these organisms are eukaryotic. Hopefully the name will help you determine that it's eukaryotic as well. Most protists are unicellular. Some have a cell wall and some do not. So make sure you put that in the second to last column. Protists reproduce sexually. This is the last column, and both the eukarya can be autotrophic and heterotrophic. So look under feeding type for fungi. Fungi are heterotrophs. The kingdom fungi includes some of the most important organisms. What they do is fungi breaks down dead or organic material and they continue the cycle of nutrients through the ecosystem. So they replenish typically the soil with nutrients in order for plants to grow, but they are heterotrophs. So make sure you're careful of that. I know we think fungi typically plant, but they feed by decomposing things. So all fungi are eukaryotic. Fungi may be unicellular or multicellular. All fungi have a cell wall, and they do reproduce sexually. Here's an example of unicellular fungi, yeast, and we have the multicellular fungi, the mushroom. Just wanted to share some cool facts about fungi. Fungi can be very helpful and very delicious. I love it on pizza, things like that. And many of our antibacterial drugs are derived from fungi. Fungi also causes a number of plant and animals to have disease. Any of you ever had ringworms? I have, unfortunately, but anyway, we can also use fungi to make antibiotics such as penicillin. So pretty cool stuff. The Plantae kingdom. All plants are multicellular. They are eukaryotes with a cell wall. They're autotrophs. They make their food through photosynthesis. And plants can reproduce sexually and asexually. Make sure you add that under the mode of reproduction. Kingdom Animalia. All animals are eukaryotic. They're multicellular. They have a nucleus, but they are lacking a cell wall. All animals are heterotrophs. We reproduce sexually, meaning we need a partner to reproduce. And we're capable of moving at some point in our lives. Please make sure you fill out your characteristics matrix. At this point, your characteristics of kingdoms comparison matrix is complete. Please show your teacher your work so you can check your answers and make corrections if needed. Thank you for going through this journey with me of classifying living things. Today you learned about the 3 major domains and the 6 kingdoms that are used to classify animals or living things. These classifications are based on how similar and different these organisms are. We use this classification system in order to communicate with other scientists throughout the world. Thanks again for listening, and I know you did a great job. Thank you very much.